It was a town-wide issue. So we put together a meeting back in April called the Voices of the Village. We said, we want to hear what your issues are, and over 300 people showed up, which was really remarkable over at the Hyannis West. And what was remarkable was that we thought we were going to try to have to, put our own issues out there to see if we could get people to help support it. And what really came out was a remarkable community, not just Hyannis, but all the villages were represented there. The counselors were there, and a lot of the department heads, listening to the issues from the voices. And what we came out of that was 5 areas where we felt that both Hyannis and the other villages really could be supportive of. And we formed some task forces, and that's what the Voices of the Village Task Force, of which this is one of them. We had the Supporting Our Youth, which is still going very, very strong. They are now their own 501c charitable committee. They are accepting contributions. They do a wonderful mentoring program over at the Hyannis Youth Community Center. They do an after-school program for kids studying. And in the summertime, they again have a reading program, and they have an unbelievable amount of volunteers volunteering to read and to be mentors. And they're just starting their 2nd year on a mentoring program and accepting applications for that. So they've done a tremendous job with that. We also had a police drug task force. That task force worked very closely with the chief and deputy chief and a lot of the crime task force, just trying to identify what are the areas and issues that are dealing with, because that was a serious crime, or a serious issue at the time, was crime down in Hyannis, where we were getting a lot of bad press. The whole town of Osterville was on the news just about every night when you turned on the news. And so we started identifying, and they did a few task force, but that task force now has kind of melded itself into what we are very proud of, which is our Neighbors Helping Neighbors. That task force started out as just trying to put together some neighborhood groups. They actually now have a how-to book on how to put together a neighborhood watch, how to take back your neighborhood, how to have like a block party, or how to get to know who your neighbors are, and what to do if you see something out of the ordinary in your area. So they kind of melded those two together, and they're actually going out into some other villages. We heard from our board last night that they're actually going out into Centerville and Katuitt to do some helping neighbors. So they're doing a lot of good things outside of Hyannis. And then we have the marketing group, which was, we need to put a spin on Hyannis or in the town of Barnstable. What can we do to promote business, and how can we get the name of Hyannis and in town of Barnstable into a positive light, and start getting people to know who we are. That group helped the police task force actually work with the police department and create their new website, where it's a lot more user-friendly, there's a lot more information on there. So they were able to, their, again, volunteers going in and helping to just remarket some of the areas of Hyannis. They also helped our own civic association create our website. So I'm going to leave some information. You can go on our website as well. We're new at this, and we're trying to put as much information out there that we can that is on the activities that we're doing. So at that meeting, we broke into the task force, and the last one that we're going to mention tonight is the one that I was facilitating. Each one of the board members actually was a facilitator in each one of these task force. So we made sure that it had representation and support from the Civic Association, that we had citizen representation. We cannot do it without the citizen representation. It makes no sense to have just the board members doing the legwork. And so the landlord regulations and rentals came out and started looking at all of the different issues that came up as far as listening to what are your issues. Is it a landlord? Is it a tenant? Is it just a property that's in your area that's been run down? The increased number of foreclosures in our town, not just again in Hyannis, in the town, was significant. And we were hearing that from all over. And what do we do with them? A lot of them are abandoned or were left out. The banks, maybe they're owned by a bank. The property is in disarray. We were finding that, you know what, there's somebody actually living there, but the property is in such disarray. What's going on? Working through the neighborhoods first. That's where you go first. You find out, is there a problem with that neighbor? Do they need some assistance getting their lawn mowed or their fence fixed or something like that? It's not an automatic, oh well, they're just not taking care of their property. We need to do some research on it. We need to really vet out those issues that we're dealing with. But the bottom line is that we work with property managers, we work with our town departments, we work with the police department, our regulatory services, the public health, and our legal team on what is it that we can do? Why aren't we able to enforce them? Because a lot of people say, you know what, I've got legal rental property, but I still have a problem. Why can somebody else over there have a basement apartment and doesn't have to go through any filings or fill out the application? What we found was that we did have some existing ordinances on the books. And there are some ones that they should be able to help address some of these issues. Their problem was being able to get the enforcement or the consistency. So we started taking them piece by piece, and we came up and said, let's address some of the existing ordinances first, see if they can address it, and then where we found where we had failures or a gap or opportunity, we created some new ones. So the first one we looked at was Chapter 59, was the comprehensive occupancy. And it's a very small, it's only a few paragraphs full, and we looked at that and said, well, why shouldn't this be enforceable? The problem is that a lot of the problem properties you have is the age. The comprehensive occupancy said that you were considered an occupant at 22 years of age. Well, 22, I'm sure when the ordinance was done, that's probably a reasonable assumption that that's a fairly, mature resident. Well, what we're finding is it's not the 22-year-olds, it's that 18 to 22-year-olds where they're on their own, they can sign a lease, and they're creating some of the problem properties. So just by raising that to 22 brings, again, an awareness level of what we're looking for in the town of Osterville for our looking at occupancy. The next one we went after was Chapter 170, and Chapter 170 was about the rental, the properties themselves and the agreement and the application process. And again, the application process is fairly forward, very simple and straightforward, but the problem is, again, is compliance. How do you know whether or not that apartment that you just started seeing a lot, somebody's living downstairs in somebody's basement or over their garage, how do you know that's a legal apartment? We can't do anything about whether or not they go in and sign that paper unless you call. If you have any questions or not, you do make a phone call. But this occupancy one, what we did was we made consistent the fine. There was a lot of inconsistencies in the town of Osterville town ordinances where some of them they're saying it's the maximum fine of 100, some of them say the maximum fine of 300. The maximum fine is 300 under Massachusetts law, so we made sure that that one was at least the maximum that we could get. Part of this also was we were very proud to help develop and implement the citizen resource line that is through the regulatory department. Robin Anderson was one of the key players in developing that and working with Tom Geiler's team to put that in place, and that was started on January 3rd. And she gives us updates on the calls, and the best thing about this is that someone can call that number and they're going to get a resolution. They're going to bring them full circle. They'll find the department that can help resolve their issue. They'll get them the answer, but it's not something where you just wait and wait and wait. And their key is all about the follow-up. So that's something that everyone can be proud of doing and everyone can use. And they're finding that to be it's a real easy make the phone call and ask the question. It does not have to be a regulatory issue. But what they can do is they can get it and say, okay, I've got a property next door. It looks like they got somebody living upstairs or in their garage. Is that a legal property? And they'll do some of that research and they'll look it up and see what they're doing. And one thing that we found was that we see them, as people going through saying, we see this all the time. Why can't they go and do something about it? Well, that's because they don't know. You need to call. You need to, be the eyes and ears on the street and make those phone calls. As we went through the process, like I said, we looked at some of the existing ordinances. They kept having a theme of where the problem properties were, or significant properties. One of them is the building and maintenance codes, which there is none in the town of Osterville. And another one is chronic properties, ones that have repeated calls to from the police department, or repeated calls, and nothing gets done. The building and maintenance code, both of these were modeled after the city of Boston in some regard. We looked at some other cities and towns. There's about 45 now cities and towns in the state of Massachusetts that have put forth ordinances to protect their quality of life in their villages or in their towns against foreclosed properties, abandoned properties, neglected properties, and chronic properties. So we're just trying to push town of Barnstable in there saying that, you know what, the town of Barnstable is not a place where you wanna come in and rent to whomever you want, walk away, and just leave us in the wake. We want to make sure that it's clear that the town of Barnstable is someplace that we want to be proud of, and we want to keep the context and quality of life in all of our neighborhoods. So the building and maintenance codes, again, I'll leave copies of the proposals that we have. I don't have copies for everyone, but I just left them with John, and he'll get them to you to read. The building and maintenance code is basically going after those things that people say, well, how come they can have couches and chairs and pillows and all sorts of torn things sitting out in their front lawn? Well, there's nothing to stop them from doing that. There's the only thing that that we can actually enforce is an ordinance is if it creates a public nuisance or public health. If you have an abandoned house next to you, they can't do anything about it so long as it's boarded up. What they can do is they'll go and they'll check, they'll say the doors are locked, the windows are secured, there's no available entry in there, there's nothing we can do about it. Even though the place has been abandoned maybe for months and months and months, or maybe years in some cases. So what we're going to do is, there's a whole series of guidelines, and that's what they are, they're guidelines. They're not for us to go after and, say, oh gee, I don't like the way that pink flamingo is in John's yard, I want to, go say that's out of my building code, or that's out of our maintenance, that's out of our quality of life. We're going after, it's being used to go after really problem issues. We all have those things maybe in our backyard that, you put the top over, you say, oh geez, I don't want anybody to see that. That's not what we're doing. These are used as tools. It's to use so that when we do have a problem property that you say, why can't we do anything about that, we would be able to do that. And again, it started in Hyannis, but it isn't all Hyannis. You all have places that you go. You may not have them in your right neighborhood right now, but you all live, work, and go through all the villages, or maybe your kids go to school, or maybe your kids go to activities. There are certain areas you don't go into because of certain properties or the neighborhoods are not as what they once were. And we want to be proud of those, regardless of where they are in the town of Barnstable. Which brings us to the last ordinance that we were going into, which is the chronic properties. These are for those properties that right now, again, there's a lot of people that rent to, as long as they get their paycheck, especially this time of year, where they're just renting, and they rent maybe to 1 or 2 people, and before you know it, there's 15 people living there. And they're not maybe staying overnight, but they're always there. The police are always being called there. Heaven forbid if something really drastic happens. As you know, there's been several of those when there's been some shootings and such, but that costs our police department extra time, extra detail to go over there and secure them. Every time there's a phone call, they need to react, they need to go there. And sometimes there's citations issued under existing ordinances, but there's a lot of times where there's not. But that cost for our safety and services should have some repercussion on that landlord that's not doing anything about it. Right now, there's nothing the landlord is responsible for. He doesn't have to do anything about it. He just says, well, all I rented to was this young man or this young lady, and I can't help what's going on. So what this ordinance does is it allows us to say, okay, we go to your property, we go there again, we go there again. The third time, we're going to start sending you notices, and they're going to be fined, or the tenant will be cited for any ordinance violations, and there's only a few that they can really actually cite them for. But the landlord now, or the property owner, is now going to get a notice saying, we have been to your property 3 times for these tenants. If we continue to go there after the 4th time, or maybe it's 2 or 3, I can't remember what the numbers were set on. These are all drafts, by the way. The idea is after this, say this 3rd time, we're going to start charging you for the police calls. So the police will then start tracking the amount of cost that it's going to take for them to keep going to that location repeatedly to service that or to make sure it's secure. And if there is some illegal activity going on that's creating a safety hazard or a safety issue for the neighborhood, they're going to put a detail on there. They're going to start charging that back as well.